Let me ask Mr. Hertz, are the fines that are being paid by the penalties being paid by the federal government to the utilities, are there penalties involved, or are those mostly for the costs of the utilities storage of the nuclear waste that the federal government should be paying for their on-site storage?
They're not fines and penalties. They're damages. And they're damages that are being incurred. What the court does is engages in an exercise of looking at the breach world and the non-breach world. What would have been the utilities expense if the Department of Energy had not breached the contract? That's the base. Then you look at what the utilities expense is in the breach world because energy has not picked up the spent nuclear fuel. Compared the two, the difference is damages. So the government is paying essentially the increased storage capacity that is necessary at various utilities because the government has not come and picked up the spent nuclear fuel.
Will those costs increase in the future as more and more utilities sue the federal government and effectively, you know, I don't know what case we've got to stand on or what ground we've got to stand on, we've breached contract?
As I've said, the Federal Circuit has said there's been a partial breach of the contract until we begin performing under the contract, until we begin picking up waste at what the the Federal Circuit has decided was the contractual rate of acceptance that the government had agreed to, that we will keep incurring damages. The amount of damages in any given case is very individualized. You know, it depends on the configuration of the utility. It depends on what kind of storage they engage in, what their physical plant looks like. At some point, you would think that utilities build, I mean, they put spent nuclear fuel in pools. They have to remove it from the pools and put it on slabs. They have to store it. They incur expense to secure that. At some point, the current utilities will stop operating. They'll stop producing spent nuclear fuel. If the federal government doesn't begin picking up the spent nuclear fuel, you'll incur costs to secure those things on site.
Currently, the damages are being paid out of the judgment fund.
Correct.
There's $24 billion sitting in the nuclear waste disposal fund.
Correct.
That the ratepayers and also the rest of the taxpayers have paid into that fund. If we don't move forward with completing this geological repository, can those funds be used to pay the utilities for their on-site storage of the SNF that we have not taken charge of?
Probably not without legislation. The government had argued that early on when we settled the case for increased costs, that we should be able to pay those increased costs, that settlement, out of the nuclear waste fund. The United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit disagreed with that under the under the Act, saying that those funds were only available essentially to design and build a repository. They weren't designed for on-site storage, which in effect that settlement was. So unless there is legislation changing that, and legislation can change it. I mean, it is a decision of the court interpreting the Act as it existed at the time.
Should we stop charging the ratepayers for the construction of a waste repository when we're not doing it?
You mean the fee, the annual fee that's
right.
being paid? Well, I mean, there is litigation that has been filed by some of the utilities challenging that, challenging the Secretary determination not to reconsider setting the rate. And that litigation is being defended by the Department of Justice. I think, under the Act as it exists now, the cost to build a repository or to ultimately dispose of this are to be borne by the utilities. This is a question if you were to stop it, if the Secretary were to determine that, and then the Blue Ribbon Commission came up with another solution, and that was going to cost a certain amount, you would just have to ramp up the rate at that point at least unless the law changed in some other respect. But under the law now, the utilities have to bear the costs through this fund.
Congressman,
Dr. Johnson, let me Go ahead.
Might I add to that?
Sure.
While I don't want to discuss the details of the litigation, obviously, I thought I might express the Department of Energy's view on this. In our view, we are absolutely required and committed to taking and disposing of the spent nuclear fuel. We believe we have an obligation that is commensurate with the obligation to take the fuel, to charge the fee, to be able eventually to dispose of it. We view the two obligations as inextricably linked in law, and that's why we are continuing with the spent nuclear fuel fee. We think our obligation to take it is tied as a matter of law to our obligation to charge the fee.
If I could ask one last question, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Johnson, this year the markup in the Energy and Water Subcommittee and also I believe in the Senate Energy and Water Subcommittee included no funds to proceed with Yucca Mountain for the licensing application. Should the NRC rule, as I believe they correctly will, that the administration cannot unilaterally withdraw the application, what will the department do in terms of the $100 to $200 million that will be necessary to proceed with the license application? Will they come in and ask for reprogramming to do that, or will they just ignore it and say we don't have any funds?
Thank you very much for the question. If the NRC were to rule, and we would follow the rulings, and we would follow appropriate appropriation processes, and we would do what we need to do to follow what we've been directed to do by Congress and the NRC.
Don't you think it would be wise to put that $100 million in there now, and then if we don't have to spend it, that'd be a wonderful thing?
I think that we feel confident that we have the authority to withdraw the application. Therefore, we need to plan for what the President's budget, which calls for no funding for continuing with the licensing. Having said that, we do have funds in nuclear energy to continue to look at research and how to manage the back end of the fuel cycle. We do have funds allocated in legacy management to continue with the records and the management of the records so that we don't lose the knowledge. We have funds allocated in general counsel in order to continue processing of the contracts. So I believe we are following a very well thought out process in order to be prepared to, when we get the recommendations from the Blue Ribbon Commission, to carry those out with your help and appropriations.
If the department, if the NRC rules that they cannot withdraw it, the license application, will the department still have the personnel in place, or is it being dismantled at a rate that we will have to appropriate money to put everybody back in place to proceed with the license application?
Certainly, we've been following a path to take care of the people, to make sure that they have opportunities, as we believe that we have the right to withdraw the motion and to close down Yucca Mountain. So we've had to move and make sure that the employees can find other positions. So therefore, we will not have employees as of October 1, and we would have to restart that process.
Thank you.
Ms. McCollum.